Major breaking news out of the NBA where Kevin Durant has requested a trade from the Nets. That is according to multiple reports. KD spent the past 3 seasons there in Brooklyn, signing with the team back in 2019, a 12-time All-Star. He has nearly 4 years and $195 million still left on his current contract. This news coming just 2 days after Kyrie Irving picked up his player option for the next season. So notable contract situations there. KD under contract again through the 2025-26 season. However, word coming out right now that he has requested a trade from the Nets. Of note, KD will have never played if he does leave a game with Ben Simmons, and Kyrie, although opting in, could still potentially be traded away. Let's welcome in a man who's been very busy over the past couple of days, and it continues today. Bill Reiter here. Look, not necessarily surprising that this news is coming down surrounding Kevin Durant, but what's your initial reaction to it?
I mean, I'm a little surprised. I mean, it felt like we were going to get this, and you're right. This was certainly a possible outcome. It just felt like first we would hear the news that the Nets had been able to find someone to take Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, as you talked about, had opted into that deal for a year. So it's a sign and trade. It makes it very difficult to trade Kyrie somewhere else. Not impossible. If Kyrie left, it certainly, I think, meant that Durant would too. And so I think one of the many questions, Amanda, and there's a lot to unpack here, is whether or not this doesn't indicate that Kyrie Irving and the Nets believe that Kyrie will be somewhere else. That certainly was my first instinct when I got over the shock and awe of the news, that if Durant wants out, perhaps he knows something about Kyrie Irving and Kyrie's future that the rest of us don't yet.
Yeah, and that was my next question is, what does this say about what's going on behind the scenes in regards to Kyrie? I mean, does this, and obviously maybe this is just pure speculation, does this tell you more that maybe KD knows something in regards to Kyrie? Or he's like, look, this is too much of a mess. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm out.
It's really hard. You're right. It's hard to know, and both are very plausible reasons, because it is an absolute mess in Brooklyn. It just is. Kyrie is going to be a Brooklyn Net if he's going to be a Brooklyn Net for the money, not necessarily because he buys into the idea and the vision of the organization. Clearly, the Nets don't want him there. They were very clear. Their head of basketball operations, Sean Marks, a few weeks ago, they wanted players who were going to be available and team players, put the team first. Those are very pointed comments that basically translated as, we want someone who's different than Kyrie Irving. So Kevin Durant could certainly look around at what feels like dysfunction, at a Ben Simmons who's talented on paper, but has only been a player on paper for more than a year now. And you're right, decide, I don't want to be here, get me somewhere else. Or he could be under the impression from his friend Kyrie Irving, because they are close, that Kyrie is planning to be somewhere else.
As you said, a lot to unpack. We're going to talk about Kyrie and Ben Simmons here in a second because they're still there with the Nets. Let's look at Kevin Durant's future here. Again, requesting a trade according to multiple sources. Reports coming out, he is interested in the Suns. He is interested in the Heat. Any potential suitors that might be willing to bring in KD, but what else would you have to give up to get him?
Yeah, here I think is the catch-22 of this situation. This is the reality for any of the guys who are under contract or who opt for a sign and trade in this class, in this free agency summer. There aren't any of the teams that people want to play for who are going to easily be able to bring in someone at that income level, at that salary level. And Kevin Durant makes well north of $40 million per year. Sure, the Miami Heat certainly make, I think, the most sense of any competitive basketball team, because if you're willing to move on from Bam Adebayo, and I think the Heat would certainly think about that. I don't want to speak on behalf of that front office. Had not had time to talk to sources in or around that organization. But just my first impression is, yes, I think the Heat would probably do anything that they can to get Kevin Durant. You know that he's got 4 years left on his deal. He's a game changer. I mean, this is a guy who absolutely makes you a contender the moment he arrives, whatever your roster. And the Heat have a pretty impressive roster already, even if they're willing to move on from, say, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, other pieces, future picks. I will say this, and you know, again, this is somewhat reporting and somewhat my reaction. Just as a thought experiment over the last few days, talking to some front office executives, some scouts, some people in and around NBA front offices, I posited the question. I posed the idea: if Kyrie got traded and Durant forced his way out, and you're the Nets, why not, for the first time in a long time as an NBA organization, just push back against this player power movement and say, you have a 4-year deal. We're not going to trade you just anybody. You don't get to bring us a list of teams you want to go to. You can certainly solicit offers that are enough. Because if I'm the Brooklyn Nets, if I'm Sean Marks, Amanda, who runs that organization, I think your job security is in serious trouble. You're watching a championship contender be burnt to the ground over the last week or so. I can't imagine ownership has an appetite for a rebuild. And so I would strongly encourage, if I was the Brooklyn Nets, and some of the sources I talked to thought it was difficult but reasonable, I would strongly say to Kevin Durant, that's all well and good, that's what you want. You need to find us the return that we need. And Amanda, those teams aren't the Miami Heat and they're not the Phoenix Suns.
Well, and to just put this into perspective, because the Suns were the first team thrown out there, I mean, is this even possible to see him on the Suns roster next season?
So they're in a really tough spot in terms of their cap situation. It is not easy at all. If you're willing, here's what makes it easy pretty quickly. If you're willing to trade Chris Paul, and again, I have not, since this is breaking news, I have not had the opportunity to talk to or text or visit with any sources on this topic since the news came down. But a Chris Paul swap, which I don't imagine Chris Paul would want to do, but maybe you don't care if you're the Phoenix Suns, that's something that could get close to making the numbers work. If I'm the Phoenix Suns, would not move on from Devin Booker given his age, but that's something that could certainly happen. If you move on from DeAndre Ayton, it certainly seems like the Phoenix Suns do not value Ayton as a max player, so you don't even have to worry about matching his contract. There are things you can do, but it's going to be very, very difficult to fit Kevin Durant into that reality. It's been done. We saw, ironically, with the Nets, they brought in James Harden, they brought in Kyrie Irving, they brought in Kevin Durant over a short span of a few seasons. It can be done. It's not easy to do.
If KD does not get what he wants, do you see him pulling a sort of Ben Simmons situation when it comes to the Nets?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I'm lucky in the fact that I ran sort of this scenario by some sources, frankly, thinking if Kyrie had not opted in and taken the mid-level exception with the Lakers or come up with a trade, then we'd be discussing this. And one of the points that someone who knows Durant made that I thought was interesting and smart, and they're speculating, but they know him certainly in a way that I don't. They said Kevin Durant loves basketball. And, every guy that plays professional sports, or most guys, say they love the game and say it for the love of the game. Kevin Durant actually loves to hoop. He obviously wants to win. He's obviously more than happy to throw his weight around. He obviously wants to target, lo and behold, the team that had the most wins in the NBA last year. I mean, he's not a martyr on behalf of his love for basketball, but he loves to play. And this source pointed out it'd be hard to see Kevin Durant being unwilling to play basketball for an extended period of time.
So let's kind of go back to the beginning. And you said, look, the way I saw this sort of playing out is no Kyrie, and then we would see Kevin Durant go. But now we're flip-flopping it there. Kevin Durant requesting a trade, Kyrie opting in. What's next for Kyrie? Does he stay?
This is one of the most important and difficult questions in pro basketball. What's Kyrie thinking today, right? It could be a radio segment. I can't, again, I'm speculating, cannot imagine that Kyrie Irving wants to be a member of the Brooklyn Nets if Kevin Durant is not there. It doesn't seem to me that Kyrie Irving wanted to be a member of the Brooklyn Nets even when Kevin Durant was there. That was very clear. There just wasn't the market for him to make the money that he thought that he might. What we don't know is whether this is Kyrie Irving telling Durant, hey, bro, I don't want to be here. I'm going to leave. I'm going to try to force my way out. Or Kevin Durant, as you said earlier, Amanda, possibly throwing up his hands and saying, I am done with the drama. We don't know the cause. I think the effect will be Kyrie Irving working overtime. Again, not easy given his contract, but working overtime to try to find his way somewhere else.
Are you buying or selling the Nets stock next season?
Oh, I'm selling it. I think anytime that you see stock that's literally on fire, you have to sell it. Now again, I'll say this again. This isn't the conventional wisdom. It isn't a part of the tradition of the NBA. And a lot of sources rolled their eyes. But if I'm Sean Marks and I run basketball operations for the Brooklyn Nets, and I see remember, they traded away a whole bunch of young, promising players to get the core of guys that they have now. And some of those pieces obviously went for James Harden, who was swapped for Ben Simmons. But there is no cupboard. The cupboard is empty. This was the plan. So if I'm Marks, if I run basketball operations for the Nets, what do you have to lose to say to Kevin Durant, no, too bad. That's nice you want to go to the Miami Heat or the Phoenix Suns. They better offer us a king's ransom. So I might buy stock if it gets really, really low on the off chance that front office does what no one else will do. But right now, things look pretty dire.
From one big three that barely happened to another big three that never happened to now this. Bill Reiter, it's been a tough road for the Nets with a lot of hope and not a lot of payoff. Thank you so much for joining us here on HQ. So Kevin Durant, again, the breaking news this afternoon, requesting a trade from the Nets, according to multiple reports out there. So what do the Nets look like with Kevin Durant and without Kevin Durant over the past couple of seasons? Much better with. We'll see what happens.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.